Hello and welcome back to my vlog, coming to you from the porch swing. It's in the upper 60s in Columbus, Ohio on January 29th. Mind-boggling. Of course, it's supposed to be in the teens, I think, in a couple of days. So, you know, we get all the seasons in 1 week. Sophisms of the Protectionists. We're back to that temporarily. Part 14. This is a chapter 4. Part 1 of 4 of this chapter. Equalizing of the facilities of production. It is said, but for fear of being accused of manufacturing sophisms for the mouths of the protectionists, I will allow one of their most able reasoners to speak for himself. Quote, "It is our belief that protection should correspond to, should be the representation of, the difference which exists between the price of an article of home production and a similar article of foreign production. A protecting duty calculated upon such a basis does nothing more than secure free competition. Free competition can only exist where there is an equality in the facilities of production. In a horse race, the load which each horse carries is weighed and all advantages equalized. Otherwise, there could be no competition. In commerce, if one producer can undersell all others, he ceases to be a competitor and becomes a monopolist. Suppress the protection which represents the difference of price according to each, and foreign productions must immediately inundate and obtain the monopoly of our market. Every one ought to wish for his own sake and for that of the community that the productions of the country should be protected against foreign competition whenever the latter may be able to undersell the former." End of quote. This argument is constantly recurring in all writings of the protectionist school. It is my intention to make a careful investigation of its merits, and I must begin by soliciting the attention and the patience of the reader. I will first examine into the inequalities which depend upon natural causes, and afterwards into those which are caused by diversity of taxes. Here, as elsewhere, we find the theorists who favor protection taking part with the producer. Let us consider the case of the unfortunate consumer, who seems to have entirely escaped their attention. They compare the field of production to the turf. But on the turf, the race is at once a means and an end. The public has no interest in the struggle, independent of the struggle itself. When your horses are started in the course with the single object of determining which is the best runner, nothing is more natural than that their burdens should be equalized. But if your object were to send an important and critical piece of intelligence, could you, without incongruity, place obstacles to the speed of that one whose fleetness would secure the best means of attaining your end? And yet this is your course in relation to industry. You forget the end aimed at, which is the well-being of the community. But we cannot lead our opponents to look at things from our point of view. Let us now take theirs. Let us examine the question as producers. I will seek to prove, 1, that equalizing the facilities of production is to attack the foundations of all trade. 2, that it is not true that the labor of one country can be crushed by the competition of more favored climates. 3, that even were this the case, protective duties cannot equalize the facilities of production. 4, that freedom of trade equalizes these conditions as much as possible. And 5, that the countries which are the least favored by nature are those which profit most by freedom of trade. 1. The equalizing of the facilities of production is not only the shackling of certain articles of commerce, but it is the attacking of the system of mutual exchange in its very foundation principle. For this system is based precisely upon the very diversities, or, if the expression be preferred, upon the inequalities of fertility, climate, temperature, capabilities, which the protectionists seek to render null. If Guyenne sends its wines to Brittany and Brittany sends corn to Guyenne, it is because these two provinces are, from different circumstances, induced to turn their attention to the production of different articles. Is there any other rule for international exchanges? Again, to bring against such exchanges the very inequalities of condition which excite and explain them is to attack them in their very cause of being. The protective system, closely followed up, would bring men to live like snails in a state of complete isolation. In short, there is not one of its sophisms which, if carried through by vigorous deductions, would not end in destruction and annihilation. 2. It is not true that the unequal facility of production in two similar branches of industry should necessarily cause the destruction of the one which is the least fortunate. On the turf, if one horse gains the prize, the other loses it. But when two horses work to produce any useful article, each produces in proportion to his strength, and because the stronger is the more useful, it does not follow that the weaker is good for nothing. Wheat is cultivated in every department of France, although there are great differences in the degree of fertility existing among them. If it happens that there be one which does not cultivate it, it is because even to itself such cultivation is not useful. Analogy will show us that under the influence of an unshackled trade, notwithstanding similar differences, wheat would be produced in every kingdom of Europe, and if any one were induced to abandon entirely the cultivation of it, this would only be because it would be her interest to employ otherwise her lands, her capital, and her labor. And why does not the fertility of one department paralyze the agriculture of a neighboring and less favored one? Because the phenomena of political economy have a suppleness, an elasticity, and, so to speak, a self-leveling power, which seems to escape the attention of the school of protectionists. They accuse us of being theorists, but it is themselves who are theorists to a supreme degree. If being theoretic consists in building up systems upon the experience of a single fact, instead of profiting by the experience of a series of facts. In the above example, it is the difference in the value of lands which compensates for the difference in their fertility. Your field produces 3 times as much as mine, yes, but it has cost you 3 times as much, and therefore I can still compete with you. This is the sole mystery. And observe how the advantage on one point leads to disadvantages on the other. Precisely because your soil is more fruitful, it is more dear. It is not accidentally, but necessarily that the equilibrium is established, or at least inclines to establish itself. And can it be denied that perfect freedom in exchanges is, of all the systems, the one which favors this tendency? I have cited an agricultural example. I might as easily have taken one from any trade. There are tailors at Quimper, but that does not prevent tailors from being in Paris also, although the latter have to pay a much higher rent, as well as higher price for furniture, workmen, and food. But their customers are sufficiently numerous not only to re-establish the balance, but also to make it lean on their side. When, therefore, the question is about equalizing the advantages of labor, it would be well to consider whether the natural freedom of exchange is not the best umpire. This self-leveling faculty of political phenomena is so important and at the same time so well calculated to cause us to admire the providential wisdom which presides over the equalizing government of society, that I must ask permission a little longer to turn to it the attention of the reader. The protectionists say such a nation has the advantage over us in being able to procure cheaply coal, iron, machinery, capital. It is impossible for us to compete with it. We must examine the proposition under other aspects. For the present, I stop at the question whether, when an advantage and a disadvantage are placed in juxtaposition, they do not bear in themselves the former a descending, the latter an ascending power, which must end by placing them in a just equilibrium. And there will be more on this tomorrow. Make it a great day, and bye for now.